I'm James Beckwith, President and CEO of Five Star Bank. As a community bank, we believe that open dialogue about the issues affecting our region is vitally important. From the economy to the environment to social issues, we look forward to the conversations and hope you'll join in.
In past conversations on Studio Sacramento, we've looked at the state of the economy through the lens of business and government with our guests. Now we look at the state of organized labor. Often described as one of the primary causes for America's declining competitiveness, labor and public employee unions are generally met with an increasingly hostile public that blames them for out-of-control wage increases and pension costs that threaten our local governments and our communities. Joining us today to discuss the role of labor are Yvonne Walker, President of SEIU Local 1000, Matt Kelly, Business Manager of the Sacramento Sierra Building and Construction Trades Council, and Bill Camp, Executive Secretary of the Sacramento Central Labor Council, AFL-CIO. Welcome all to the program.
Thank you, Scott.
So, what is it that has made labor so unpopular in our media culture today? What do you think is driving that at this moment?
Well, I think part of the problem is that the media culture and every place else except here is bought and paid for by the people with a lot of money. And the people with a lot of money say we don't like to have the fact that workers have a voice. Or, more importantly, that they not only have a voice, but they have some influence. So what they do is lie to the public about the true character of who we are and what we do. We're the ones that are committed to high-skilled, high-wage jobs. The Chamber of Commerce says that's the most important variable in deciding where to locate a business. So here's the one group that drives education for workers to increase the likelihood that a company would want to locate in our community is being blamed for the opposite. So what we know is that when you look at when the United States was the most productive in terms of economic growth is when we had large membership in unions. And when you look at the decrease in the union membership is when we get these periods like the economic bust we just came through.
But how do you respond to the statement that unions in a globalized economy, they impede the ability of business to respond to the market?
It's just not true. Business, if you look at a company like Apple, which has its production in China, nobody's impeding Apple's production in China, but when Apple comes to San Jose to build a building, they build a union. They build a union because they know it's going to be built right. When you talk to Hewlett-Packard or you talk to Intel, they want to make sure that their buildings have perfect air conditioning, perfect electricity, are well built that can withstand any kind of problem. And that's the reason they use union labor.
Okay, well, you know, and let's make sure that everyone knows here. You and Matt both represent public sector unions, or private sector unions.
And public sector. I represent public sector.
You have public sector?
Public sector, private sector,
okay.
both.
All right. Yvonne, you represent government,
Workers, state
public
workers.
State workers.
Absolutely.
All right. One of the big issues, going everything from Scott Walker to the No on 32 campaign, is about, in the minds of the proponents, is rebalancing the scale, and that the unions have become too powerful in government employment, and that essentially that taxpayers are completely at your mercy for ever-increasing wage and pension benefits.
Well, I would tell you, if you talk to my members, they would not talk about the ever-increasing rising of their wages, because realistically, over the last few years, our wages have been flat. And I find it kind of ironic that they make those claims when realistically, you never see them, big business, make the claim that we have to, we should pay workers more, because really that's what moves the economy. So if we're paying our workers more, they're going out in our businesses and they're buying product. They're buying houses, they're buying groceries, they're buying luxury, they're buying whatever it is that they buy. And in turn, that allows that small business owner to stay in business. I mean, and the classic example of it was during Arnold Schwarzenegger's term, when he did the 15% pay cut on state workers. That had a devastating impact statewide, but it was particularly devastating in Sacramento because you then didn't have people who had income that they could spend. Businesses closed. Businesses closed, and I think that that was a major contributing factor to why we're so far behind the rest of the state in recovering in our economy.
Well, to talk about that virtuous circle with regards to that union wages create jobs, you represent the construction trades.
That's correct.
Okay? And there's always, and as a developer myself, I know this very well, which is there's always a push-pull between the union and the development community about what's appropriate to pay. And so the classic example that's used a lot by folks in my field in having this discussion is that, for instance, for a government subsidized housing project, it is often, because of prevailing wage, seen as more expensive to build that type of product for a low-income person than you going non-union, and you can actually build for about the same cost a more luxurious product for, say, the middle class. How do you respond to that, Matt?
Well, I'm at a loss to understand why the public should be responsible for funding a developer to build low-income housing. If that developer was to take that project on himself, he could pay whatever wages he was inclined to. I believe the necessity of a public subsidy on any project should stipulate certain things that benefit the local community. And what benefits the local community is not paying bottom wages for people in the construction industry, but giving them a fair wage, making sure that they have benefits and the ability to be productive in their community.
Okay, well, let me respond to that. While it is true that if you don't take any government subsidy, you could potentially build any way that you want. But do you think, though, that in order to get at the solution for, say, low-income people, that isn't it more important to get it built by any means necessary than to create some sort of artificial wage differential?
I don't think it's an artificial wage differential, but I do believe that when it comes to public housing, if a developer is making money being able to build projects in an area, that building inclusionary housing into those projects shouldn't necessarily be a city's responsibility, but if the developer takes that on himself, again, he is allowed to pay whatever wages he wishes to. But if the city participates in it anyway, and I understand the need to build inclusionary housing, I believe at that point in time, the city has put funding into it, maybe a state bond program has put funding into it, and at that time, those wages, again, should benefit the community in a way other than just providing the housing. Developers making money on it, let's not make any bones about it.
But would you agree that wages are going into the community? They just may not be at the wage level that they might be if it was a full union
But
program.
why would we want to have a community of low wages?
Well,
How does that benefit Sacramento? How does that benefit any area to have a community of low wages? Why would we want to do that? Because realistically, the developer is going to make money, whether he's building it under a project labor agreement or whether he's building it on his own. He is going to make a profit.
Only if he or she can get bank financing.
Yeah, but the realist, nobody. I would venture a guess that there is no developer out there that is building homes out of the kindness of their heart and not looking for a profit.
There are a few, but
they're all making money.
Those few are not.
They're not Habitat
but
for
they're
Humanity.
not in the room. But they're not in the room.
That's right. They're not Habitat for Humanity.
But I think the other point is, we've seen segregated housing in this country,
Sure,
in the world, and here in Sacramento, and it doesn't do anybody any good to let people say just do whatever you want to. Because what you end up with is some terrible community relations and some terrible racist segregation and class segregation. And the truth is, as a democracy, we need everybody talking to each other. We don't need people living in a racist kind of environment where they keep other people out because they're not rich or because they're not of certain character. We need a world, because that's the way the world is, that represents this phenomenal strength we have as a state, as our diversity.
Let's talk about the world for a second. So another one of the arguments is that in this time of globalization, globalized economies, where it is that money moves all over the world, capital moves all over the world, that labor, organized labor, is an anachronism in that environment. In that, how can we have a labor movement in this country when it is that we're competing against nations like China, where there is no comparable type of organization, and so therefore they're undercutting us on prices all over the place, and that we as a country need greater flexibility in order to be able to meet that competition.
I've been to China, and it is unionized. It's not as strong as that. They're very, the trade unions in China wish they were like the United States. But let me give you the real example.
To get there.
Let me give you the real example. The first country in the Middle East that expelled their dictator was the country that we often don't know about called Tunisia. 140,000 Tunisians joined the labor movement within a few months after the dictator left. What we know about dictators don't like workers being organized. And what we're seeing throughout the world as we challenge these dictators and take them out is workers then to begin to join unions to create a better life. So what we have to do as a nation is to promote a democracy around the world. And as we do, workers will want to have a voice. And they will do that by working together.
If that works, why has labor declined in this country?
It's declined because the whole economy has shifted. We used to have an industrial-based economy, and we moved it into this information system. And that's a very difficult environment to organize in. But let's take an example here in Sacramento. There are 1,300 janitors that are union in Sacramento. But it didn't happen easily nor quickly. And in fact, just in the last few months, the people that own the commercial property on Capitol Mall said, we now have money for child care, for health care for your children, or for dental care for your children. These janitors are making $9 an hour. And the employer, who's basically the building owner, it's not really the janitorial firm, the building owner decides, said, we're not going to provide any health care for these $9 an hour people. Well, that's insane. What kind of country you want? So they had a union, and they spoke, and they are the heroes and heroines of being able to say, we'll accept having a low wage, but we got to have health care for our kids and dental care for our kids. Now that's a place where workers came together and expressed their voice and created not a big better life, but a small improvement in their life. They held on to what they had.
So Matt, is the answer complete unionization of everybody?
The world.
Well, I know that statistics show that the higher density unionization of a country, the lower poverty, the higher tax base, the more people that are covered by health care and have pensions to look forward to in their retirement.
Is that realistic though, Yvonne?
Absolutely it is. I was just telling them in the prep room, I was watching HGTV. They did a special on Switzerland, had one of the highest cost of living areas to live in. You would think that it's only rich people that are living there. And they were asking, well, how does the average person get to live here then in this beautiful country and skiing and everything? Because they pay a living wage. Their waitresses, their grocery store clerk, they make $80,000 a year because that's what it costs to live there. So they make sure that all of their citizens can enjoy their country. You know, they don't, and I think that that's really the way that we need to look at it. I get very disturbed about the fact that we have the conversation not about lifting people up, but how do we hold people down and only lift up a few? To me, that is a wrong conversation, and it's time to flip that conversation. We talk about pensions. We talk about pension reform. Do you know the governor just recently signed Senate Bill 1234, which was sponsored by Senator DeLeon and the pro tem Darrell Steinberg. And what that will do, it's the first of its kind in this nation. And what that does is it sets up a secure choice retirement system for private sector workers, right? That these are workers who, one, might not have a pension. It's not billed as a total thing. It's a supplement to Social Security. But if we don't start taking this on, if we don't stop getting away from the politics of let's do less and less and less and less, and not look at, we live in a society where we are all responsible for each other, and we're all independent. We're interdependent upon each other. We're going to have a big problem.
So let's talk a little bit about the upcoming election. This is a big election in a lot of different ways. In the state, one of the issues that is on the ballot is Prop 32. And Prop 32 is going to make some significant changes in how political action is done, particularly in terms of its restrictions. Share with us what your view is of Prop 32 and what it's actually going to do.
You want to start?
Yeah, I think that Prop 32 is extremely deceptive. You know, it's billed as campaign finance reform and getting the special interests out of politics. But it doesn't do that. What it does is it removes the voice for working people while it gave exemptions to corporations and billionaires and super PACs and everything else. And so essentially it would be, you're watching the Yankees and the Red Sox in the World Series, and you take the bats away from the Red Sox, and you take the gloves away from the Red Sox, and the Yankees have all the equipment, and wow, they win. They run the field. That's exactly what it does.
What happens the day after this passes? If this were to pass, how will the world be different here in California?
I think the world will be vastly different when working people don't have a voice and the wealthy elite are running everything. So consequently, what we envision things in the following elections to be horrible. These people, our voices will be taken away. The people that work hard for a living, struggle to put food on their tables and pay their bills, no longer will have a voice. They will do things in this state. It'll no longer be recognizable in terms of the worker takeaways, workplace safety. Once the elected officials are all of those wealthy elites' friends, they will be able to run the table and have takeaways in worker safety, in wages and benefits, and it'll decimate the state.
Now, Matt, for people who are not government employees or just involved in unions at all, and they're sitting out there and they're thinking, well, this just doesn't affect me. You know, it'll affect unions, it'll affect union employees, but it doesn't really mean anything to me. What is it that they need to know?
They need to know without the labor movement, they wouldn't have an 8-hour day, they wouldn't have a weekend. Many of the workplace precautions related to safety would not exist if it weren't for labor unions representing their workers. So if you're not a union member, what you need to be aware of is this is an effort to stack the deck for the people that sign paychecks and to take away the rights of the people that cash paychecks.
You know, the truth is it affects the non-union worse, because the only reason why people can go out and earn a living is because we got a good educational system, because we have a public transportation system, we have a water system, we have infrastructure. But I want you to think about this. The Koch brothers, who are from Kansas City, who have an office in Des Moines, just dumped $4 million into paying for this fraud. Well, they'll be able to pay people to collect signatures for a constitutional amendment. None of us will be able to say anything about it. They can take over the whole state. Why would they want an educational system? They live in Des Moines. Why do they want a public transportation system or a water system or an electric system? They live in Des Moines. Well, so the point is, these billionaires like these Koch brothers will control the state. They don't live here. They're not engaged in. So the people who don't have a union, they have more to lose, because the people are going to control everything.
I'm glad you raised education, Bill, because you know, education is an area where here's the counter argument to that. In society today, we need that to happen because it's the only way, for instance, with public education. Now, we don't have a member of the California Teachers Association here, but there's a feeling among some that the only way to reform education and to get especially the least among us, their children served, is that, quote unquote, and this is something that I heard recently in a meeting of supposed education reformers, that they have to break the back of the teachers union because it's so powerful. And this group pointed out to this new movie that just came out, Never Back Down, as a example of the fact that unless power is taken away from the unions, we can never get to a solution on education. And while that may be a very, very superficial assertion, why are people buying it?
Well, we don't live in a movie world, but too many people imagine we do live in a movie world. I've watched what happened to the public education system in the state of Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia and South Carolina, where my family roots are, and it's been devastated by this privatization of the public school system. The setup of these academies, they're not getting good jobs. They're not getting a good standard of living. The divorce rate in Mississippi is higher than any place else in the world.
Really?
Absolutely. You know, the cancer rate in those places is horrible. You go to Lake Charles, Louisiana, they have the highest cancer rate in the world because they don't have any unions. So there's nobody trying to do it. So my point is...
Incidence of cancer... Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm saying the problem is we have a lot of petrochemicals in California, and we're doing something about trying to protect the public's interest. But more importantly, a good school system needs public support. If the unions were so powerful, how come we got the highest class reduction rate, the classroom student to teacher ratio? If we need more unions and we need more money to help build and educate, we know that if you reduce the adult-child relationship to 15-to-1, the kids will learn a lot better. But it is these corporations that dominate the state that say we don't want to have a good educational system. Let's blame the schools, let's starve the schools and then blame the teachers union for the fact that kids are not learning because we starved the schools. We had a time when we had a great educational system in this state where everybody could go to Sac State, could go to a community college.
But wasn't that before the unions?
No, that was when we cut
unionized?
that's when we cut the, no, that was when we cut the resources. We had 30% of the population was union back when we did that. Today it's 10 to 12%. The fact of the matter is we're charging people so much money and we have so few resources going into the state university system like Sac State, you can't get your degree in 4 years. And the problem, and we can't starve our training system and then complain it's the teacher's fault because we starved them to death.
So the answer is just more higher taxes?
No, I think there's a lot of stuff that we could do. I think we could change the way we credential teachers. We know that the system for credentialing teachers doesn't work. We should be getting people into the classroom before they become a teacher and build a credentialing system like we do in the construction industry into the work site, so that people get a job as a teacher aide, become a teacher assistant, a teacher associate, a teacher after having the experience in the classroom. And you know what will happen? We'll know who's great with kids. And those are the ones that will get a raise.
Yeah, but will the bad ones ever get fired? Because the other charges...
But if they're making a living as a teacher aide, why are you so worried about it? They're not going to move up. We don't do that in the construction trade. If you don't pass the coursework and demonstrate your ability to do the job, you don't get a raise. You don't move up through the...
You don't become a journeyman.
You don't become a journeyman. The same thing would be true here. We know that 92% of the teacher aides who get their teaching credential are still in school teaching, and 50% of the people that get their teaching credential from the state university are out of the classroom in 5 years because they didn't know what it was like. So all these people that complain about those terrible teachers, 50% of those people who go through the normal system leave the classroom in 5 years. But we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars into a system of credentialing that doesn't work. But we know there's an alternative because we've done it. But we have to then build a political will to go out and make that happen. And that means we have to have the resources to be able to say we need to put another adult in every classroom.
Okay, so that actually is an alternative approach that sounds like a solution. A charge is that the unions don't come to the table with solutions. And it's only when it is that we're up against a cliff, we're about to fall over the fiscal cliff, that the unions ever come to the table and work on actually partnering in making solutions. Is that a fair charge?
That's not a fair charge, and it is absolutely incorrect. When you look at, they talk about pension reforms and the governor's pension reform package. I will say that Local 1000 a lot of the reforms that were there, we had already done. It is in our interest to have a strong CalPERS, right? And so we're going to do whatever is necessary. We moved to the highest 3 years. We changed factors. We rolled back benefits, and our members voted for it. And we took it to our members, and we voted for it. We have worked with CalPERS to figure out how they invest in California so that we can bring in jobs in the private sector, so that they can do construction projects and public projects and use our pension money to pay for it, putting people back to work. So I don't think that that is getting off, waiting till we're falling off the cliff. We were a big driver, like I said, behind Senate Bill 1234, private sector retirement. It has nothing to do with us. But we have a fundamental belief that our neighbors need to do well. Our communities need to do well. And it is obscene for somebody to work 20, 30, 40 years and not have a secure retirement at the end, not a lavish retirement, just a secure one. I mean, it is obscene. We live in the greatest country in the world, the greatest state in the greatest country in the world. And to not be able to have that be the case, I think there's something really wrong with that. Why aren't we flipping the conversation? And I will tell you, it is unions that have started this conversation, not business owners, not millionaires, not billionaires. We are the voice for working people, not just the members that are in our unions, but for our communities.
All right. And we're going to have to leave it right there. Maybe we can get business on one time with you all, and then we can have the complete conversation.
Oh, I did.
That's our show? Well, that's our show. Thanks to our guests, to the American Leadership Forum for its editorial partnership, and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
I'm James Beckwith, President and CEO of Five Star Bank. As a community bank, we believe that open dialogue about the issues affecting our region is vitally important. From the economy to the environment to social issues, we look forward to the conversations and hope you'll join in.